Welcome, deep divers, to a journey through history that's, well, both breathtaking and, frankly, heartbreaking. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the history of Cambodia. And what hits you right away is this paradox.
Yeah.
You've got the serene, ancient beauty of Angkor Wat, right?
Yeah.
But then you also have these incredibly deep scars from one of the worst genocides of the 20th century.
It's quite the contrast. Its history really gives you this profound insight into, well, what humans are capable of, both incredible creation and unimaginable destruction.
Absolutely. It feels like a story about resilience, about that enduring search for, sovereignty and justice.
Indeed. So our mission today is to sort of navigate this huge timeline. We're talking thousands of years back.
Right.
To really understand the key moments, the surprising links, and the legacies that shaped this amazing Southeast Asian nation.
And you've asked us to pull out the important bits from a pretty hefty source, the Wikipedia article on the history of Cambodia.
It's a lot of ground to cover.
It is. But we're here to guide you through it, cut through the noise, and hopefully give you those aha moments, a really solid perspective without getting totally bogged down.
We'll journey from its prehistoric roots through these powerful empires, times of foreign influence, devastating conflict, right up to, well, modern Cambodia today.
Okay, let's unpack this epic story then. Where do we start? The very beginning.
Let's do it. The dawn of Cambodia. From the earliest people in caves right up to the first societies. We're talking deep prehistory here.
Tens of thousands of years back.
That's right. There's this cave, Lang Sabin, in Battambang province. The archaeology there is just fantastic.
What did they find?
Well, Hobbinian stone tools. These are sort of distinctive stone tools from Southeast Asian prehistory, dated around 6,000, 7,000 BCE. And even pottery from 4,200 BCE.
Wow. And this wasn't just like people passing through?
No, not at all. There's this Franco-Cambodian prehistoric mission, and they documented a whole cultural sequence in that cave, going back, get this, 71,000 years.
71,000. That's incredible. So what were these early societies like?
Well, they were surprisingly sophisticated for their time. These weren't just basic hunter-gatherers.
Right.
They had pretty developed hunting strategies, good stone tool making, artistic pottery, even complex social practices. It shows a real depth to early civilization.
And something you mentioned that I found fascinating, Cambodia wasn't isolated back then. It was part of a maritime jade road.
Yeah, exactly. For 3,000 years, think about that. From 2000 BCE to 1000 CE, it points to these incredibly early regional connections, trade, kind of an early globalization, really.
Amazing. So these societies were already quite dynamic.
Absolutely. And we see more evidence like skulls and bones found at Samrong Sen from around 1500 BCE. These are linked to the first rice cultivation and bronze making in Southeast Asia. Huge steps.
Right. Game changers.
Totally. Then you get into the Iron Age, maybe 500 BCE to 500 CE, and this is where we see the first solid proof of ongoing sea trade and socio-political links with India.
So complex societies are really forming now.
Yeah. Organized societies, advanced languages, living in stilt houses along the coast, the Mekong Delta. And the key thing here, for you listening, is to realize these societies were building something. Through trade, through farming techniques. Thousands of years ago, they were laying the groundwork piece by piece for the massive empires that came later. It wasn't just poof, Angkor Wat appeared.
Right. It was a long, gradual buildup.
Exactly.
Okay, so that foundation leads us into these first major kingdoms, Funan and Chenla, starting around the 1st century CE.
Right. Funan is the first one we really know about from the Chinese records. It was centered down in the lower Mekong, and it's often called the oldest regional Hindu culture.
Showing that strong early connection with India, part of the Indosphere.
Precisely. Prolonged interaction. And Funan wasn't small. The sources talk about high population in urban centers, even walled and moated cities like Angkor Boré. That's pretty serious stuff for the early centuries CE.
And its location was key, wasn't it?
Absolutely critical. Funan was this strategic, economic, and administrative hub right on the maritime Silk Road.
Controlling trade between the Indian Ocean and China.
Both land and sea routes. And finding Roman and Persian coins there at sites like Okolio, that just drives home how far-reaching these connections were.
It really does paint a picture of an ancient globalized world. What about that founding myth? The Indian Brahmin marrying the local princess.
Ah, the Kandinya and Nagisoma story. Yeah, it's a classic founding legend. Scholars debate how literally to take it, of course.
Right.
But it's often seen as sort of an allegory for how Indian culture, religion, political ideas diffused into Southeast Asia, a symbolic marriage of cultures.
Interesting. And Funan got pretty big.
Oh, yeah. It peaked in the early 3rd century under a king named Fan Shiman, stretched maybe down to Malaysia, west towards Burma, had a strong navy, bureaucracy.
But there's a debate about what Funan actually was politically, like one big state or something else.
Exactly. Was it a truly unified kingdom, or more like a collection of chiefdoms that were interconnected but maybe not centrally ruled in the way we think of an empire? Scholars like Miriam Stark and Michael Vickery have really dug into this. The evidence is still being interpreted.
And its decline. What happened?
Well, theories, again. Maybe maritime trade routes shifted, making its coastal position less important. Or perhaps it was conquered by this new rising power, Chenla. The sources aren't perfectly clear. It highlights how much we're still piecing together about this early period.
Okay, so Funan fades, and Chenla emerges around the 6th century.
Right, and Chenla controlled larger areas, more inland territory. But here's another puzzle. Those early Chinese records saying Chenla conquered Funan.
You're saying maybe take those with a grain of salt.
Well, modern scholars like Claude Jacques point out those records can be pretty vague. They tend to prefer looking at local inscriptions, carvings on stone found in Cambodia itself.
And those don't show a clear break.
They don't really show this sharp political shift, this conquest narrative. So it's a good reminder that history gets rewritten as we find more evidence or look at old evidence differently.
Makes sense. So what happened with Chenla?
It eventually split around 706 CE into what the Chinese called land Chenla and water Chenla. Water Chenla, the coastal part, seems to have become a vassal of the Selendra dynasty in Java for a time. Okay. But land Chenla remain independent, and that's where Jayavarman II comes in, achieving independence and setting the stage for, the big one.
Ah, yes, the Khmer Empire.
Yeah.
802 to 1431 CE. This is the golden age, right?
Absolutely. Wow. 6 centuries of what sources call unparalleled technical and artistic progress and achievements. Really the peak, the cultural and technical apogee of pre-industrial Southeast Asia.
And it kicks off with Jayavarman II in 802. What did he do?
He did something incredibly symbolic and politically savvy. He declared himself Devaraja God King through this special Hindu ritual up on Mount Kulin.
So basically declaring independence and divine right to rule.
Exactly, asserting political autonomy, royal legitimacy. And he established Hariharalaya, the first real capital of the Angkorian era.
And the engineering from this period? It's just mind-blowing. The berets.
Oh, the water management was incredible. Kings like Indravarman I and Yasovarman I built these massive reservoirs, the berets. The West Beret was, 8 kilometers long?
8 by 2 kilometers, holding 50 million cubic meters of water. It's staggering.
And absolutely vital. This system supported a huge population.
Which brings us to Angkor itself. The city, or rather the complex of capitals.
Right. The whole area, often just called Angkor, spread over maybe 1,000 square kilometers. And by the 12th to 13th centuries, estimates suggest it housed maybe 750,000 people.
The largest pre-industrial city in the world.
Supported by intensive wet rice farming and all the fish from the Tonle Sap Lake, it was a megacity sustained by incredible engineering.
And the architecture we still see today. Angkor Wat.
Built by Suryavarman II, reigned 1113-1150. Took 37 years. Those 5 towers representing Mount Meru. It's just the pinnacle of classical Khmer architecture. He also expanded the empire to its greatest size.
But then there's Jayavarman VII, maybe even more significant.
Many consider him Cambodia's greatest king, yeah. Reigned 1181-1219. He was a Mahayana Buddhist, a bit different from the earlier Hindu kings. He built Angkor Thom, the huge walled city with the Bayon Temple at its center, the one with all the faces.
Yes, amazing place.
But he wasn't just about temples. He built roads, rest houses for travelers, bridges, even hospitals. A huge investment in public works and infrastructure for the people.
It gives you a sense of the society, and we actually have an eyewitness account from back then.
We do, incredibly. A Chinese diplomat, Zhu Daguan, visited from 1296 to 1297 and wrote this detailed report, The Customs of Cambodia. It gives us invaluable insights into daily life, clothing, religion, everything.
Fantastic. So with all this incredible achievement, how did it decline? What happened to this magnificent empire?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And there isn't one single answer, but researchers point towards environmental factors playing a big role.
Like what?
Well, things like progressive overexploitation of the delicate local ecosystem. Think large-scale deforestation, the erosion that follows. Maybe their amazing water system eventually faced pressures it couldn't handle.
So potentially ecological collapse.
It's a strong theory. Combined maybe with religious shifts, the move from Hinduism towards Theravada Buddhism might have altered the societal structures that supported the massive temple building, for instance. It's likely a mix of factors.
It's a powerful reminder, isn't it? Even the greatest civilizations aren't immune to environmental limits. A lesson that still feels very relevant today.
Definitely.
Okay, so Angkor fades, and Cambodia enters what's called the Middle Period, roughly 1431 to 1863, a time of big shifts.
Right. After a Siamese or Thai intervention around 1431, the political center moved south, away from Angkor down towards Phnom Penh, Long Vec Dong, closer to trade routes.
And there was some economic recovery.
Yeah, briefly in the 16th century, there was prosperity from maritime trade along the Mekong. This is also when Europeans first start showing up.
But it also brought more trouble from neighbors.
A lot more trouble. You had Muslim Malays, Cham people, Christian Europeans getting involved. But the big players were the Siamese to the west and the enemies, the Vietnamese, to the east.
And they saw Cambodia, or the Mekong Basin, as strategically vital.
Exactly. The key to controlling Indochina, as the sources put it. So you get frequent wars, especially with the Siamese. They actually conquered the capital, Long Vec, in 1594.
And the Vietnamese were expanding too.
Yes, their southward march pushed down into the Mekong Delta, which was historically Cambodian land. This gradually cut Cambodia off from the sea, stifling its independent trade.
So caught between two powerful expanding neighbors.
Pretty much. By the 17th, 18th centuries, the Cambodian king was basically a vassal, paying tribute sometimes to Siam, sometimes to Vietnam, sometimes both. National sovereignty was effectively lost by the early 19th century.
A really difficult position, and this leads to the French.
It does. King Ang Duong, facing this pressure from both sides, felt he had no other option. He actually entreated the aid of the French to try and protect what was left of the monarchy and the kingdom.
Wow. So the weakness and external pressure paved the way for colonialism.
It's a classic pattern, unfortunately. Which brings us right into the French Protectorate era, 1863, and then the shadow of war stretching up to 1975.
So King Norodom signs the Protection Treaty with France in 1863.
Yeah.
Cambodia gradually loses its sovereignty.
Right. Fast forward to World War II. Japan occupies Cambodia. Initially, they let the Vichy French administration stay.
But then?
In March 1945, the Japanese stage a coup, kick out the French, and allow King Sihanouk to declare independence. He brings back the Khmer script, which was actually a really popular move.
But it didn't last long.
Nope. France reimposed control by October 1945. Cambodia eventually got full independence in 1953 under Sihanouk again.
And he tried to stay neutral in the Cold War. That must have been tough.
Yeah. Incredibly difficult, especially because eastern Cambodia became a major base area for the North Vietnamese army, the NVA and the Viet Cong fighting in South Vietnam.
So Cambodia got drawn into the Vietnam War.
Inevitably. And here's where it gets really complex. Sihanouk publicly condemned U.S. bombing of Cambodia, but declassified documents later showed he actually privately told the U.S. it was okay to bomb the NVA sanctuaries as long as Cambodians weren't harmed.
That's quite a balancing act. A desperate one, maybe.
Trying to maintain neutrality while dealing with foreign armies on your soil and a superpower wanting to attack them. Meanwhile, domestically, things were getting very tense.
The Khmer Rouge.
Exactly. The communist insurgency starts to grow, led by these figures, many educated in Paris, like Pol Pot.
And then the coup in 1970.
Right, March 1970, General Lon Nol and Prince Sisowath Sirikh Matok overthrow Sihanouk while he's out of the country. They immediately ditch neutrality and ally with the U.S.
And demand the North Vietnamese leave.
Which the North Vietnamese refused to do. Instead, they launched attacks against Lon Nol's army, often letting the Khmer Rouge take over the territory they captured. Sihanouk, from exile in China, actually urged his followers to join the Khmer Rouge to fight Lon Nol.
Wow, that must have fueled the Civil War massively.
It did. And then the U.S. involvement ramps up. Operation Menu, the secret bombing campaign, starts in '69, becomes overt, and then there's a ground incursion in April 1970 trying to hit those NVA bases.
Okay, this leads to that really heavy debated topic, the U.S. bombing and the rise of the Khmer Rouge. How are historians looking at that link?
It's hugely debated and really important to understand the different perspectives. Some historians, like Ben Kiernan, argue quite strongly that the Khmer Rouge would not have won power without U.S. economic and military destabilization.
Claiming they used the bombing as propaganda.
Right, that they used the bombings, devastation, and massacre of civilians as recruitment propaganda. Basically, arguing the bombing drove people into the arms of the Khmer Rouge.
But that's not the only view.
No. Other historians acknowledge the bombing definitely caused devastation and likely boosted recruitment, but they dispute that it was the primary reason the Khmer Rouge won. They point to other factors, too. It's a crucial area where historical interpretation really matters, and the impact was undeniably tragic regardless.
And China was involved, too.
Yes, significantly. China armed and trained the Khmer Rouge. Pol Pot visited China often. Apparently, on advice from the Chinese Communist Party, the Khmer Rouge initially allied with Sihanouk in exile to form that united front against Lon Nol. Mao Zedong himself expressed support for their policies in '74.
So multiple major powers deeply entangled.
Deeply. Meanwhile, the Lon Nol government in Phnom Penh was plagued by corruption and infighting. By 1973, the Khmer Rouge, increasingly acting on our own, controlled maybe 60% of the country.
And the fall of Phnom Penh.
April 17th, 1975, the communist troops marched in, the Khmer Republic collapsed, and Cambodia entered its darkest hour.
Democratic Kampuchea, the Khmer Rouge era, 1975 to 1979.
Yeah, and the transformation was immediate and brutal. The Khmer Rouge, the CPK, the Communist Party of Kampuchea, ordered everyone out of the cities. Complete evacuation.
Everyone. Forced into the countryside.
The entire urban population. Forced to become farmers overnight, whether they knew how or not. It was year zero. A radical attempt to completely remake society.
Destroying the old ways entirely.
Completely. Old society remnants were abolished. Religion was viciously attacked. Estimates say something like 95% of Buddhist temples were destroyed. Farming was collectivized. Money, banks, gone.
Who was in charge of this nightmare?
The top leadership were those Paris-educated figures. Pol Pot, Inga Seri, Nguyen Chi, Sun Sen Sihanouk, who they'd allied with earlier. He was basically put under house arrest.
And internationally, how did they relate to Vietnam?
Terribly. Relations went south fast. Border clashes, ideological fights. The CPK was fiercely nationalistic, even paranoid. They purged party members who had lived in Vietnam, and this conflict got tangled up in the bigger Cold War picture.
China backing Cambodia, the Soviets backing Vietnam.
Exactly. It escalated until December 1978 when Vietnam launched a full-scale invasion. They took Phnom Penh pretty quickly, January 7th, 1979, and pushed the remaining Khmer Rouge forces towards the border with Thailand.
But the devastation caused by the Khmer Rouge regime itself, the genocide?
It's almost impossible to fathom. Just the initial evacuation of Phnom Penh, 20,000 people died from exhaustion or disease right away.
And then starvation.
Widespread starvation, malnutrition. City people had no farming skills, resources were mismanaged or non-existent, and then the executions.
For anything seeming like.
For speaking a foreign language, wearing glasses because that marked you as an intellectual, scavenging for food, being late for work, even crying for relatives who had died. It was utterly brutal.
And targeted persecution too, like the Cham people.
Yes, the Muslim Cham minority faced what's called the Cham genocide. Whole communities were attacked. And in the eastern part of the country near Vietnam, Pol Pot became paranoid about Vietnamese influence.
Right.
He ordered the extermination of supposedly 1.5 million Cambodians with Vietnamese minds. In reality, it led to the killing of at least more than 100,000 to 250,000 people in that eastern zone in just about a month. It's horrific.
Just staggering numbers. What are the overall estimates?
When you try to grasp the bigger picture, estimates for the total number of excess deaths under the regime in just under 4 years range from about 1.5 million to 2 million people.
That's what, nearly a quarter of the entire population?
Between 21% and 24% of the 1975 population. Some studies suggest executions might have accounted for up to 60% of those deaths. They've found over 23,000 mass graves containing maybe 1.3 million victims. It's just an immense human tragedy fueled by radical ideology.
A truly sobering chapter. And even after the Vietnamese invasion pushed the Khmer Rouge out, the suffering wasn't over. There was a long aftermath, right? Occupation, more war, 1979 to 1993.
That's right. The Vietnamese installed a new government, the People's Republic of Kampuchea, or PRK. But the Khmer Rouge didn't just disappear.
They went back to guerrilla warfare.
Exactly. Retreated to the jungles near the Thai border and kept fighting. And again, external powers got involved. China kept backing the Khmer Rouge. The U.S. and other Western countries, primarily opposing the Vietnamese occupation, also ended up giving support to a coalition that included the Khmer Rouge.
Seriously. The U.S. supported a coalition with the Khmer Rouge.
It's complicated Cold War politics. There was a coalition of three main resistance groups: Van Pek, which was royalist, the KPLNF, which was Republican, and the Khmer Rouge's political wing, the PDK. This coalition, the CGDK, held Cambodia's seat at the UN right up until 1993, largely thanks to Chinese and Western backing against the Vietnamese-installed government.
That's quite something, and this meant more war.
Yes, a renewed civil war. It displaced another 600,000 Cambodians into refugee camps along the Thai border and led to tens of thousands more deaths. Just prolonged misery.
So when did things finally start to turn towards peace?
Peace efforts really got going in Paris in 1989. It took a couple of years, but they reached a comprehensive settlement in October 1991.
And the UN stepped in.
Massively.
Right.
The United Nations Transitional Authority in Cambodia, UNTAC. Huge peacekeeping and administrative operation. Their job was to enforce the ceasefire, bring home nearly 400,000 refugees from the camps, try to disarm all the factions, and crucially, organize free and fair elections.
Which brings us towards modern Cambodia. From 1993 onwards, did the elections work?
Remarkably well in terms of participation.
Yep.
UNTAC supervised them in May 1993, and over 90% of registered voters turned out. Huge mandate. This led to a new constitution in September 1993.
Establishing
A multi-party democracy, technically, under a constitutional monarchy, and King Sihanouk was reinstated as king.
who formed the government.
Initially, it was a coalition. Prince Norodom Ranariddh, Sihanouk's son and leader of the royalist party that won the most votes, became first prime minister, and Hun Sen, leader of the Cambodian People's Party, the former Vietnamese-backed ruling party, became second prime minister.
Hun Sen, he's a former Khmer Rouge commander himself, right?
Yeah.
Yes, he defected from the Khmer Rouge and fled to Vietnam earlier, and that power-sharing arrangement didn't last smoothly. Hun Sen gradually consolidated power.
Through controversial means.
Yes, including a violent coup, essentially, against Ranariddh in 1997. He purged opponents and really solidified his position as the strongman, which he maintained for decades.
What about accountability for the Khmer Rouge era?
That took a long time, but eventually an agreement with the UN led to setting up the Khmer Rouge Tribunal, starting work around 2004. It has managed to sentence several senior leaders for the atrocities beginning in 2008, though many felt it was too little, too late.
And the country still deals with the physical legacy of war.
Oh, absolutely. A devastating legacy of countless landmines just sown indiscriminately by everyone during decades of fighting. It's still a major danger and hinders development in many areas.
So looking at the political situation now.
Well, the ruling party, Hun Sen's Cambodian People's Party, or CPP, has been in power for a very long time. It became essentially a de facto one-party rule after the main opposition party was controversially disqualified before the 2018 elections.
And there was a recent change at the top.
Yes, in 2023, after decades in power, Hun Sen stepped down as prime minister, and his son, Hun Mene, who was educated at West Point in the U.S., was sworn in. So a dynastic succession, continuing the family's and the party's grip on power.
So for you listening, this modern history really shows a nation still deeply marked by its past, still seeking justice, dealing with the remnants of conflict, and navigating this really complex political landscape long after the fighting stopped.
The echoes of history are just incredibly loud in Cambodia. They really shape the present and the future there.
We have covered so much ground today. What a deep dive into Cambodia's history.
We really have.
Seeing that incredible ingenuity of the Khmer Empire, the waterworks, Angkor Wat, then the impact of colonialism, the absolute devastation of the Khmer Rouge period.
And through it all, this thread of resilience.
Yes, exactly. Understanding this huge sweep of time. It's not just about the dates and the names, is it? It's about seeing how these eras connect, how history shaped this nation, and how those echoes, as you said, still resonate so strongly today.
It's a powerful story about global connections, about the rise and fall of civilizations, about the consequences of ideology and conflict.
So as we finish up reflecting on Cambodia's journey, from that ancient brilliance to such profound tragedy, and now its modern path. What's the big takeaway? Maybe it's this stark illustration of what the human spirit can do, both create wonders and inflict horrors. And that constant struggle for sovereignty, for justice, it just continues.
Definitely something to keep thinking about, how a nation grapples with such extremes in its own past.
Indeed. Something to mull over until our next deep dive.
Oh,